as you will learn, I break my conditioning process into two parts. We have escape conditioning and avoidance conditioning. And it is very important to understand the difference between those two things and why each is important. Overall, when we talk about collar conditioning, what we're talking about is familiarizing our dog with this new sensation and teaching them how their behavior controls it. At the end of the day, when we do our job right, the dog feels in control. That's what we want. It's not something that happens to them. It's something that they cause to happen and that they can prevent from happening. The dog should be 100% in control the whole time. A couple key things of collar conditioning is throughout the conditioning process, we do want to work the dog as low as we can. The dog is learning, okay? They don't know what this weird new feeling is. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So it's not fair for us to use a strong motivation and hold them highly accountable for not performing in a way that they've never learned how to perform. So during the conditioning process, we want to make sure we're being fair to the dog. We want to be as low as we can. And we want to be helping the dog as much as possible. Escape conditioning is all about teaching the dog how to turn off the feeling from the electronic collar, which we'll be calling pressure pretty much from here on forward. So escape conditioning is all about teaching the dog how to make pressure go away when they feel it. If you feel this thing, here's what to do. That's our escape conditioning. And it's important that we do escape conditioning first. Avoidance conditioning is when we're teaching the dog, now that they know how to make the feeling go away, how to avoid the feeling if they never want to feel it again. And the dog has to learn that. And to me, this is the phase that's most important, because this is the phase that's going to create lasting behavior. But it's still a conditioning phase because, as you will see, it's not intuitive for all dogs, and sometimes we have to coach them and guide them and help them understand. That's our job. We're their teacher. One of the sort of crucial elements of escape conditioning that's important to remember is that the onset of pressure, when it starts, has nothing to do with the dog's behavior. We're choosing to apply pressure sort of at any random time from the dog's perspective so that we can teach them how to make it go away. So it's not contingent on their choices. That's why it's so important to start on the lowest possible level, because the dog is not given any opportunity to avoid it. We need them to feel the feeling so that they can learn how to make it go away. Why is that important? And this is crucial. How many of you guys are relatively familiar with training dogs, like with food, luring into positions, etc.? Have you all heard some version of the phrase, "Don't name it till you love it"? Okay? So let's take, for example, a dog that we're going to teach to sit with food. And so we take food in our hand and we bring the food upward. And ideally, the head goes up, the butt goes down. But for any of you guys that have trained young puppies to do this, you know that often on the first try, that's not what happens. You bring the food up and the puppy jumps and paws at your hand. Or they spin a circle and bark at you. Or they take 3 steps backwards and get kind of confused and frustrated. And it takes a little bit of time and patience, and pretty soon they figure out that the moment their butt hits the ground, you go, "Yay," and you feed them. And with some repetition, that starts to be their immediate response to you luring up with the food. That's when you actually want to give it a name. And the idea is, hey, I need to use this tool, the tool being food and the process of luring, to teach the dog to sit on cue. But in order for that to happen, I need to make sure that when I do this, it makes the dog sit. So that after I say sit, I do this, the dog sits. If when I do this, the dog doesn't sit, it's not going to help me teach the dog to actually sit when I say so. If when I bring my hands up, the dog spins a circle, how's that going to help me teach the dog to sit, right? So the first step is make sure you can get the dog to sit when you need to. Then you can do that thing to reinforce what the word sit means. Does that make sense? Okay, so now bring ourselves back to e-collar. Let's say I want to use my e-collar to reinforce come when called. Now, what is a dog going to do the first time they feel an e-collar? Anybody know? No, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what a dog's going to do the first time they feel an e-collar. Are they going to come to you the first time they feel an e-collar? Probably not. They have no idea what that weird feeling is. So if I want to use that feeling to reinforce the come command, I got to make sure that when the dog feels it, they will actually come to me. That's why you have to do your escape conditioning first. It's the avoidance phase that actually teaches the dog to respond to the cue more reliably. But if we're going to use that e-collar pressure to reinforce the cue, sit, we've got to make sure that when the dog feels pressure, they're going to actually do, or come rather, they're going to actually come to us. Okay? And that's your escape conditioning is the equivalent of doing those few reps of luring the dog, making sure you can lure them in the position quickly before you put the word before it. It's the exact same concept. Does that make sense? Okay. And we want to do that for every behavior that we're going to use the collar to reinforce. So just because I've gone through the conditioning process and taught the dog to come to me when they feel the collar and they're getting good at that, doesn't mean I can just switch gears and now ask them to down, and if they don't down, press the button and they're going to figure that out. More likely than not, it's going to be confusing to them. So we have to teach them that there are a variety of behaviors that can turn off pressure if you feel it. So that's what escape conditioning is all about. Escape conditioning is basically your don't name it till you love it phase of training. Make sure that when you press the button, you can get the dog to do the thing that you need them to do before you put a name on it, or you're going to run into trouble. Okay? Once the dog knows how to shut off pressure when they feel it, then we can move on to avoidance training. And avoidance training is where things start to get a little bit more fair to the dog, because now they have a chance where if they don't want to feel pressure, they don't have to. So we give the cue or the command ahead of time, and if the dog complies, whippy. If they don't, then they feel pressure, and when they feel it, they know what to do to make it go away. Right? So when we press the button, it makes the dog come to us because we've already taught them that's what to do when you feel this feeling. Does that make sense? So if I say come and the dog doesn't come, and I press the button and they don't know what it is, so they spin a circle and run the other way, that doesn't really reinforce my come command, right? What I want is whatever the consequence is for not coming should actually make the dog come to me. That's what needs to happen, right? The stimulation needs to actually make the dog come to you. That's what's going to reinforce the behavior.